TGC Requiem here with Modern Shadow Grixis. Uh, this is a rematch or a replay of a match from last night. This was the first match in my league. Software didn't record right, so this is going to be a playback. I've got it set up so that you won't be able to see the result until we get to the end. Excuse me. So we are on the play. Opening 7, no good, obviously no lands, so we're going to mulligan here. This looks pretty good. We have access to 2 lands, Thoughtseize and Street Wraith, so with a fetch and Thoughtseize and Street Wraith, that gives us an ability to quickly lose 7 life, which means we have access to turn 2 Death Shadow, plus we will obviously have Fatal Push. Opponent keeps 7. Snapcaster on top. Snapcaster's fine here. Leading on Street Wraith because we don't want to have to use the Street Wraith unnecessarily, at least not until we know what our opponent has. I'm going to go ahead and Thoughtseize our opponent. So we can see they're clearly on Ad Nauseum. And then I think looking at the hand here, it's pretty clear from, you know, if you've ever played Grixis, or if you haven't played Grixis and you're just wondering, Grixis really has no way to interact with enchantments. And so Phyrexian Unlife is an enchantment. It's basically allows them to take an extra 10 points of damage, and typically almost always requires an extra combat step or combat phase to beat them. So it's a little more difficult for us to deal with than Angel's Grace, which we could potentially get to with or get at with a later hand disruption. So I think we're just going to take the Unlife here. Right. Forget these flashbacks. The opponent leads on Seachrome Coast and then runs out their sleight of hand. So we're going to probably just play a Rainforest here. Before we crack the Rainforest, we're going to cycle Street Wraith, and that way we have a better shot at hitting our land. Fatal Push, unfortunately that's a pretty dead card in the matchup. So right now we're just focusing on getting our life total as low as possible so we can stick a Death Shadow. Should go out here. We know our opponent played Seachrome Coast. Now he's played Dreadship Reef. And he's just going to go ahead and put a storage counter on the Dreadship Reef right off the bat. Excellent draw here. The fetch land is going to allow us to get our shadow up to a 5/5. Plus we'll also be able to run out Snapcaster into Thoughtseize, turning the Death Shadow into a 7/7. So our opponent has drawn 2 Ad Nauseums, which is pretty rough. We're going to put our opponent down to 13 this turn, and they have 3 lands in hand. So basically, we're going to put them to 13, and we're going to be able to do 9 damage next turn. So we have him on a 3-turn clock. So we attack, he goes down to 13, he plays a 3rd land. We attack for 9. He goes down to 4, plays his 4th land, and probably, presumably, adds a Dreadship Reef counter on each of those turns. So let me think about it. So again, he's at 2 mana right now. Next turn he's going to get to... He's going to have to tap the Dreadship Reef. That gives him 2 there, 4 mana. Right? Yep. So then the next turn he plays a land, Dreadship's Reef. But if he does that twice, we should be able to just combo kill him out. So I think our damage spot here, where we are, lends us to, rather than go after the ad nauseum and hope to draw, another Thoughtseize to get the other ad nauseum. If we take the Angel's Grace, we just hope he doesn't draw into one of his other pieces. I mean, we can't take both ad nauseum, so let's take the Angel's Grace and just hope that he doesn't draw into another Angel's Grace or Phyrexian Unlife. At least that's the plan here. So then we attack for 7. We got him down to what? 5 cards. Opponent plays a Temple. Puts the card on top. That's not great. Throws another Dreadship Reef counter on it. So we actually hit Bloodstained Mire, which is great. So if we play this now, we can get our Death Shadow up to a 10/10. Snapcaster Mage to, so we can actually swing for 12 damage here. Putting our opponent down to 1. Pretty good solid start here. The opponent's going to play a land next turn. And if they play a land the next turn, they can cast Ad Nauseum, but whatever they draw is going to kill them. So we're looking like we've got this one pretty much wrapped up. Except they did keep a land on top, or a card on top, which means it's possible that they drew something relevant like a Angel's Grace, and maybe they were hoping to run double Angel's Grace here, back-to-back turns. Plays a Seachrome Coast. And then Phyrexian Unlife. So this is actually pretty huge. We're going to attack here. When we attack, we're going to do another 12 points of damage to put him to a -11. But Phyrexian Unlife says, as long as you have you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. As long as you have 0 or less life, all damage is dealt to you as though its source had infect. Because all 12 of this damage is going to be done while he has more than 0 life, it's not actually going to do any of that infect damage this turn, and unfortunately that's probably going to give him the time, because we know he has an island and an Urborg still. That's going to therefore give him the time he needs to cast Ad Nauseum, unless we draw a Lightning Bolt here. If we're to draw a Lightning Bolt or Kolaghan's Command, we can actually do 2 damage to get him to 0 before combat, and then all that infect damage would kill him. So he had a good draw. Now we're looking for one of our own. Got a Street Wraith. We get one more shot. Draw into a Thought Scour, get one more shot. Another Thought Scour. Now we're down to just Lightning Bolt, however. We draw a Thoughtseize. That's not going to be good enough. We go to combat anyway, even though we already know at this point we have lost the game. And our opponent goes for Ad Nauseum here. So we let him play it out. You always let the Ad Nauseum player play it out. A couple reasons. One, you want to know what version of Ad Nauseum he's playing. There's kind of 2 main versions. There's a Spoils of the Vault version and a Peer Through Depths version. They just play a little differently. It is my understanding or opinion that the Spoils of the Vault version allows them to kind of have a backdoor win condition, or an easier backdoor win condition with whatever the little creature guy is called, Laboratory Maniac. They can use Spoils of the Vault to name a card not in their deck, and then if they have Serum Visions, they can draw while they have no cards in their hand. The key thing we're looking for here is basically what his win conditions are. So as we let him draw out, we see he has Lightning Storm with the Simian Spirit Guides. Again, we saw that he's a Spoils version. We see Laboratory Maniac, but we don't see Conflagrate. Sometimes they run a Conflagrate or some other things. But as it is, we know we're dead. He uses his Simian Spirit Guides to fire off the old Lightning Storm, puts a land on it, and that's game. So we'll be back with game 2 shortly. Sorry about that. I had a runny nose, had to step away for a second. All right, so if we look at the sideboard here, we pulled out 3 of our lightning bolts. We pulled out 3 fatal push. Pulled out 1 of our Kolaghan's commands and a land, 1 of our fetch lands. Excuse me. And so that would be to bring in Stubborn Denial, 2 surgical extractions, 2 collective brutalities, 3 Fulminator Mage. And so essentially, so again, yeah, we would have brought in Stubborn Denial to help as a counterspell, 2 surgical extractions in case we can get a shot at a ad nauseum, or sometimes Simian Spirit Guides enough to get the win, or buy you enough time at least. Collective Brutality, more hand disruption. The deck we're playing will be running Leyline of Sanctity. We know that's the case, but when they don't hit Leyline of Sanctity, you're rewarded so much for the hand disruption that it's still worth playing. Fulminator Mage, sometimes you can kind of catch them on a little bit of a land stumble, and you can keep them off the colors they need to cast one of their key spells. Either keep them off white or black sometimes. I don't know that it's always worth it, but sometimes it is. And probably better on the play and worse on the draw, honestly. So, yep, and that's it. We wouldn't have pulled anything else in. So let's go ahead and close that. Game 2 here. I don't think I've actually lost a match and barely lost any games to ad nauseum with Grixis deck or Shadow decks so far. Seems like a pretty good matchup for Shadow. So looking at this hand, I think this is fine. We have 7 damage to ourselves with Street Wraith and 2 fetches by turn 2. So if we draw any sort of Thoughtseize, Street Wraith, type effect, even a Lightning Bolt, we could throw it ourselves to get a turn 2 Shadow down. Worst case, we're getting to Serum Visions and kind of set up our draws. Seems pretty good. Not something that I'm willing to go lower on cards here. So opponent does open with Leyline of Sanctity, and we're kind of, and again, even though we don't have the hand disruption, we're okay with that. We don't want to probably keep a hand that's heavy in hand disruption when we know our opponent's going to be pulling a Leyline, so we're kind of in a good spot here with the hand we got. Although I will say sometimes you can just use the hand disruption on yourself, fire off a Thoughtseize just to help get your Shadow in play. So here we're just going to crack this, go get a Watery Grave, and then Serum Visions, Surgical Extraction, Death Shadow, and Street Wraith. So we drew Street Wraith, and we have Shadow and Extraction on top. I think we actually probably would not mind putting Extraction, knowing that we have the second Street Wraith. We can now actually play 2 Death Shadows on turn 2. Because we'll have another fetch, Street Wraith. They'll have 2 2/2s. So actually I think we want to have the Surgical Extraction with the Death Shadow on top of it. because surgical extraction is also going to help us grow our death shadows. So yeah, we're going to put that on top and shadow on top of it, and then just pass to the opponent. Plays a Temple of Enlightenment, puts the card on the bottom. That's good for us. So here we're going to probably crack the fetch first because we don't want to draw too many more lands. Go get a Blood Crypt, cycle a Street Wraith, cycle a second Street Wraith, and now we can go dash shadow, knowing we can turn our 3/3 shadows into 6/6 shadows next turn, so it is even better to do that than play a shadow and an angler. So we're just going to go shadow here. Opponent's got a Lotus Bloom on suspend. I guess I missed him casting the Lotus Bloom, or suspending Lotus Bloom the first turn. He's going to cast a Serum Visions, puts a card on the bottom, 2 cards on the bottom, and then doesn't play another cantrip, which is good for us. Second Verdant Catacombs, really strong here. Really turning our shadows on. Gonna Serum Visions, possibly even draw like a Thoughtseize. We could really put this out of reach. Oh, so we actually hit Stubborn Denial, so that should pretty much just seal the game for us here. Keep both of those on top. We could Thought Scour our opponent to draw one, but we wouldn't be able to cast it if we do this turn. But it may be worth... Alright, so we're just going to run the Gurmag Angler out after combat, leaving us Serum Visions. Opponent hits a Phyrexian on life. That is a little frustrating. So instead of killing him this turn, we're going to have to live through 2 more combat steps. But since our opponent's tapped out, I think we just Thought Scour our opponent to draw one of our Stubborn Denials. That allows us to naturally draw Stubborn Denial on our turn. No? Did we not do that? I guess I thought we would have. So I would say that's a little bit of a misplay. We could have... Oh no, we can't target our opponent, so that makes sense, actually. Opponent had Leyline, so we couldn't Thought Scour to draw one of the Stubborn. So we only have 1 Stubborn, which means if he resolves the Lotus Bloom, casts the Ad Nauseum, and if he has Pact of Negation, then we're going to lose. So attack here, do damage. Really no reason to have to play the fetch necessarily. Opponent is going to cast the Lotus Bloom. Suppose we could just Stubborn Denial this, but then, again, I don't know, I'd rather Stubborn his actual Ad Nauseum if he makes that play. Looks like he's cracking it for black, so he's actually naming Spoils of the Vault. So he doesn't even have an Ad Nauseum, I'm guessing, here. He does name Ad Nauseum, reveals a bunch of cards. Name a card, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal the named card. Then put that card in your hand, exile all other cards revealed this way, and you lose 1 life for each of the exiled cards. So again, he doesn't lose life for having 0 or less life. So he named Ad Nauseum, got Ad Nauseum, and now he is going to cast Ad Nauseum. And actually, as we look at all the cards, there was 1 Pact of Negation in there. So with the 34 cards left and the 3 in his hand, I think they usually run like 3 packs of negation, so we know 1 got exiled. terribly huge odds that he has it in hand. So either way, we're going to fire off the Stubborn Denial on the Ad Nauseum. It gets countered, and then our opponent concedes. So he didn't actually have the Pact, which is good for us, obviously, as we get the win. And we're going to go to a game 3 here. Game 3, we'll just do a quick sideboard check. See if I did anything different. Looks like I put the fetch land back in and pulled an island. So I pulled one land in the first match just because it's going to be a pretty fast game, and it's going to kind of be somewhat dependent on me drawing my lands in my opening hands, and so it's, I don't know, I didn't feel like I necessarily needed to have the 19 lands. A lot of the lists that you run, like Jund, run 18 lands, and so it's pretty easy taking a land out here. A lot of times you would take a land out on the draw anyway, but what I realized was, you know, the Misty Rainforest is going to allow me to grow my Death Shadows, and it's going to actually allow me to improve the rate at which I hit my Delve creatures, and so I pulled an island instead. There's almost no way I'm going to fetch for an island, and honestly, of all the cards I'm trying to get out early, island, if I do draw island, that's potentially or probably the worst one. So other than that, no other changes. Sorry, I had to go on mute again there. I got a little bit of a cold today, probably from staying up late playing last night. Didn't feel particularly great. So looking at this hand, again, I like it. We have 2 Street Wraith. We can open up. At this point, our opponent knows what we're on. There's not a whole lot of interaction on his side that he's going to be able to play early against us. And so here we have a Shadow. We have 2 Street Wraith. We have turn 1 interaction with Inquisition Thought Scour. The interaction, more of a cantrip, I mean, here. So at the very least, we have the ability to quickly likely turn Death Shadow on, because we're going to do 7 points of damage just here alone to ourselves. We also have a good shot of turn 2 Gurmag Angler, because if we fetch, play this, and Thought Scour on our first turn, we can actually just land a Gurmag Angler turn 2. So I think we're good here. We have 3 draw steps essentially to hit a land. Opponent does hit another ley line, that's a bummer. So Thoughtseize is even better than Inquisition. So we Street Wraith, and now we can Thoughtseize. We still haven't hit a land, which is makes us a little nervous. If we Thoughtseize, we can definitely play a Death Shadow, but then we run well, not so much the risk, but we're only going to be able to actually get our Death Shadow to a 4/4. We can't Inquisition or Thoughtseize our opponent. We can only Thoughtseize ourselves. I think it's probably likely that we just go for the Thoughtseize on ourselves here. Planning to probably go after the Inquisition. Yep. Alright, so that puts us down to 11, which means if we draw another land next turn, we're now in position to cast both if we draw a fetch land, we're in position to cast both Death Shadow and Gurmag Angler, which is where we want it to be. Opponent plays a Serum Visions. And so here I decide that I need to make a decision on how fast I'm going to play. And so what I do is I surgically extract. I'm going to surgically extract my opponent's Serum Visions. He doesn't have a white land yet. Maybe we can take away Serum Visions, reducing his ability to draw into a white mana source. Plus we get a peek at his hand. So we see our opponent has Darklick Shores, Pact of Negation, Simian Spirit Guide, and Urborg. And if we look at his sideboard, or not his sideboard, but his deck, it doesn't appear he has 2 packs in the deck, 3 packs because he has 1 in hand. But it doesn't appear that he's brought anything funky in to fight us other than the ley lines. So it makes it clear what our plan is. He doesn't have a particularly great hand. Really no other way to filter. He did put 1 card on the bottom and 1 card on the top, but our surgical extraction makes him shuffle away whatever card he had on top. So anyway, I think at this point we just know we got a Pact of Negation to play around, and that he also can kind of ramp ahead a little bit here. We draw another non-land. So I think here we're going to run out the Shadow. Again, hoping that we can get a fetch. If we get a fetch, we're still attacking for more damage with Shadow next turn than Gurmag Angler. Worst case, we could Thoughtseize ourselves. Not that that's necessarily a great play. Opponent plays land. Alright, we get a shock here. Not quite as good of as a fetch, but still pretty solid. And I think we're just going to run out the Gurmag Angler and then hold Thought Scour to our opponent's end step. So this gives us 11 damage. If we draw a fetch land, we could actually do lethal next turn. Opponent plays Lotus Bloom. And he actually cracks the Lotus Bloom for all black. So that's interesting. He doesn't have white. Maybe he's just... So he's actually casting Ad Nauseum without a Phyrexian Unlife and without the white mana. We know he has a Simian Spirit Guide, but without the white mana to... What am I thinking about here? To cast Angel's Grace. So reveal the top card of your library, put that card in your hand, you lose life equal to its converted mana cost. You may repeat this process as many times. So it looks like he's just going for a value Ad Nauseum here. He names Phyrexian Unlife. So he's basically hoping that the cards he draws... Or no, sorry, he reveals Phyrexian Unlife. He's... Okay, so he's drawing actually exactly what he needs. If he draws a white mana source now, he can actually cast Phyrexian Unlife. He now draws an Ad Nauseum. So you can't see this because it's a little off screen, but let me see if I can't scroll this over for you. Oh, yeah, you can kind of see it now. Then he reveals Darkslick Shores, City of Brass, Seachrome Coast. So now he's revealed a white mana source, although I think Seachrome Coast would come in tapped here. Seagram Coast enters the bat, I think, right? Oh, but he had the City of Brass, right? So he's gonna cast City of Brass, Simian Spirit Guide, and Phyrexian Unlife, which is absolutely brutal to us because again we can't really handle enchantments once they enter the battlefield. He also has Ad Nauseum, so we're essentially just dead. Um, but we almost never give up. So we'll just fire off our Thought Scour on end step. We actually turn over a Surgical Extraction into the graveyard. Our second extraction. Right, yes. So at this point, if we draw Snapcaster Mage, we can actually surgically extract his Ad Nauseum, which would essentially buy us the time we need to win the game. We do know he has a Pact of Negation, however, and if we go to surgically extract the Ad Nauseum, if we were to draw a Snapcaster Mage, then he would have to pay on his upkeep to protect himself against the Pact lose trigger. He'd have to pay the mana to avoid that using the Simian Spirit Guide in hand, and that would buy us a turn to get a second attack in for the win. So yeah, so we just basically need a Snapcaster Mage, and we draw a Snapcaster Mage. How amazing is that? It's always my favorite thing when I think about, well, this is the only card that I really can draw, and then I draw it. So we play a land, and then go to combat. Get into a good negative life total. Make a little bit of a mistake here. Or no, I don't. That's fine. We're good. Never mind. And then after combat, we're just gonna fire off the Snapcaster, Surgical Extraction. He packs it as expected, and then he's going to go to upkeep. He's going to have to pay the pack. This buys us the one more turn we need. Except I forget, yeah, the opponent can actually, this is an instant speed win condition, and so he's going to just cast Ad Nauseum with the pack trigger on the stack. He loses a life there, gets a, for the City of Brass, gets a -1/-1 counter. And he's going to start drawing cards. Now remember, he just used that Simian Spirit Guide, I believe, to cast his Ad Nauseum. And he had casted the Phyrexian Unlife and City of Brass the turn before. So again, always let your Ad Nauseum opponent play out their combo. The reason I do this is I had a buddy of mine who actually played Ad Nauseum for a while, and one time I scooped to him when he cast Ad Nauseum, and after we picked the cards up, he let me know that I probably shouldn't do that because he had actually exiled 2 of his Simian Spirit Guides, and therefore couldn't hard cast the spell that he needed to cast. And so our opponent has drawn his deck, and that's the exact scenario we come into here. He only has 2 Simian Spirit Guides, and he has his Lightning Storm, but he has no way to produce the colorless mana. He can produce 2 red, but he has no way to produce the extra mana needed to cast Lightning Storm. And this is because he used 1 Simian Spirit Guide to cast Phyrexian Unlife, and he used the other Simian Spirit Guide to cast his Ad Nauseum. And so now he doesn't actually have the mana to fire off his Lightning Storm, and since we made him play it out instead of just scooping, we are going to get the win. He even exiles both Simian Spirit Guides before he realizes he has no way to get that extra mana. So, lesson of the day, make him play it out. Pretty awesome win, pretty fun win. I thought those games were pretty cool, probably a little less exciting since it's a playback, and I'm sure I kind of am not as excited now as I was at the time. But anywho, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. And because I always forget, we're just going to go ahead and real quick throw that up on screen. 1021 and 2-1 in the match. All right, see you next time.